You're listening to the Courage Hotline with Candace Doby. What's up, you guys? I'm Candace Doby, speaker, author, and courage coach. And I help people, specifically emerging leaders, activate their personal courage in order to perform to their potential in school, in work, and in life. And on this podcast, I give keep it real advice to callers who either call in or write in and need help with a specific personal or professional challenge that they are experiencing. But whatever these problems are, they seem too risky and too confrontational to address. So they need a little help checking their fear, conjuring their courage, and confronting their problems. And that's why I am here. I'm going to be sharing what I've learned as a student of courage and courage coach to help them work through their dilemmas. All right, y'all, let's get into this episode's questions.
Hi, Candace. I know I'm courageous and I can be courageous, but proving my agency to authority or anyone I feel above me is still a struggle. It takes a lot of emotional energy to a point that it depletes me. How do you sustain your courage level? Is the goal to be courageous all the time, anytime? Or are we practicing courage by saying, nope, that's not my fight to fight. I'm sitting this one out.
Okay, so why do you feel like you have to prove your personal agency? That's the first question that is coming up for me. So proving, the word proving, it is to show that something is true. We prove that we're innocent. We prove that we're guilty. We're familiar with the word prove being used in that way. When you're proving, you're pointing to evidence that supports your point or perspective. You also, in the process of proving, may feel like you need to overcome skepticism or doubt from another person or even from yourself. So proving can take on the energy of overcoming, which is effortful. Let's be real. Overcoming doubt or fear or a label that has been put on you requires effort. Okay, so that's proving. Now we talk about personal agency next. And so you say that you feel like you have to prove your personal agency. Well, personal agency is your own power and responsibility over your thoughts and your feelings and your actions. So a person who understands their agency understands that they influence what they think, how they feel, and how they move or how they take action. So if we're proving personal agency to someone, essentially what we're doing is we're trying to show that our personal power and influence over our thoughts and our feelings and our actions is true or it's real. And see, I don't really think that that's what you're trying to do or what you mean by your question. I think what you're saying is that you feel challenged in demonstrating or displaying your personal agency, especially when you're engaging with authority. So if that is true, then it's not that we're proving, anything to anybody. It's that we're demonstrating or exhibiting or displaying. So if we ride out with that, and let's ride out with that because that's the direction that I'm going, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, why is it maybe harder or more difficult to demonstrate or step into personal agency when dealing with people who have more authority than you? And I am thinking that it is because the stakes likely feel higher for you. And the stakes may feel higher because there are power dynamics at play. Oftentimes with authority, there comes power. And maybe the person you want to have a conversation with seems more powerful than you. And that power could come from their position. It could come from their extroversion, because in general, the world favors extroversion over introversion. It could be that their power comes from the people that they hang with, their circle. And so when we consider this power, it can inform what we feel like we can say or how we have to say it. So power, it definitely has the power or the ability to separate. And something about that separation can often feel threatening. So maybe the person with more perceived authority and power has the ability to isolate you from people and projects and promotions. Like this person can maybe retaliate against you because of what you say or how you behave or act. And since we feel threatened, maybe we have a heightened emotional response that seems harder to control or leverage. And so I got to be real, when we can't seem to activate our ability to manage our emotions, a few things happen. And one of those things is that our judgment gets pretty cloudy. And the interesting thing is that when we are taking courageous action, or when we want to take courageous action, rational thinking is absolutely needed. It is needed for risk taking, to take risks. And, when we are kind of overcome or overwhelmed by our emotions, then we can be in an emotional state that inhibits us from questioning our assumptions. And we all make assumptions, about how we think conversations will play out if we're talking to people who seemingly have more authority or power than us. We make assumptions about what people will say and how they will react. And so when we are in our feels, it's harder to really think about these assumptions that we are making and question them, question the accuracy of them, question the validity of them. It's hard for us to look at them objectively. So that's one of the things that can happen when we're overcome by our emotions that are, seem to be charged up because we are engaging with someone who we believe has more power or authority than us. Something else that can happen when we have heightened emotions is that we can overestimate experiences from the past and the present, and that can distort our reality. Maybe you've had experiences in the past, negative experiences that, you have a lot of emotion around, so you remember those experiences more so than others. And so those are things that you are considering more heavily when you are engaging with people who have more authority than you, and it makes it harder for you to demonstrate or step into the fullness of your personal agency. Another thing is that maybe there are negative experiences or difficult experiences that are right here in the present moment that have the ability to influence how you move, how you act, and what you say in the present moment because of, recent events that have happened. So this is to say that past experiences, present experiences that might skew negative, or they have a lot of emotion around them, things that you don't necessarily want to repeat, they can have a bigger and heavier influence in your consideration set that impacts how you move forward. And I also want to point out that now we've got to kind of have a narrative going on. So, based on your question, you say, I have a hard time, proving my personal agency, but now we know really it's demonstrating your personal agency or displaying it when you are engaging with people that have authority. So now we've got this narrative, and it's a narrative that we're probably repeating to ourselves, or you're repeating to yourself over and over again when opportunities come up for you to take courageous action, especially when you're dealing with people of authority. We have a narrative that it's hard, that it's difficult, that I struggle doing this. And so it becomes easier to play out because it's just a narrative that we've repeated to ourselves over and over again. So these are some reasons why I think it might be harder for you to step into and demonstrate and display your personal agency, particularly when you're dealing with people who have more authority and have more power than you. Now, dealing with all of this and being aware of all of this and being unable to make sense out of it or move forward can absolutely feel draining. So I hear where you're coming from. Now, you asked me specifically, how do I sustain my level of courage? Okay, how do I sustain it when I feel this difficulty in engaging with this type of person? Well, I just want to clarify that courage is not actually something to be sustained. So let's talk about what I mean. Courage is conjured every time we need it. We have to conjure it. So courage is not some trait that lays dormant inside of us, waiting for us to call it to come out and play. We actually have to dig courage up every time that we need it. And, I'm not going to say that every single time we do it, it's going to require the same level of effort. That's not necessarily true based on the context of what we are dealing with, what's in front of us. Sometimes the digging courage up and out, it's a 2-inch deep dig. Okay. At other times, it can feel more like 2 feet, or it can require us to dig 20 feet deep in order to get courage to come up. And so we're able to conjure courage when we do a couple of things. When we understand the risk in front of us, when we understand exactly what we are dealing with. We're able to conjure courage when we understand the reason that we have for taking the risk. And then we also are able to conjure courage when we have the appropriate resources inside of us to deal with or persevere through the risk, the less than ideal side of risk. So the goal is not to be courageous all of the time. I know that's something that you asked. The goal instead is to be courageous for the right reason. For a reason that is internally motivated and aligns with your values. So the reason why we act courageously is we act courageously to live out our values, particularly when challenge or risk is present. Let's say you have a value of self-respect and you've clarified and articulated that value to yourself. And then you happen to be in a conversation where a coworker with more authority than you, let's say by a position or title, that coworker calls you a name that they think is funny, but you think is shady, you think is disrespectful. This would be an opportunity for you to honor yourself and your values by courageously speaking up. So this is a perfect moment or example of when it is appropriate and it is necessary to conjure your courage to live out your values, to behave in a way that is congruent with what you say you believe and what you say you value. This is when we act courageously. Okay. What I want to talk about next is some real ways to lower the stakes, because I think that is really what the question is about. It's, how do I act courageously when I'm dealing with people who have more authority than me? And we talked about why that can seem hard to do. It's because there's a power dynamic at play. There's, a sense of heightened emotions at play. So I think part of the question here is, how do we lower the stakes? How can we act courageously without completely draining ourselves or yourself? And so I want to give you a couple of strategies here that you can think about more later, hopefully, to help you with what you are dealing with. The first thing that I'm going to say, and I've said this before on the podcast, but it's a really important strategy or tool that you can put in the courage toolbox. And so I want to say it to you. And that is, we can lower the stakes by asking questions. Asking questions of yourself and the person you're talking to, because questions break down assumptions. And so let's start with you. What are some of the questions that you can ask yourself to help lower the stakes? Well, let's just say first that the stakes may feel really high because of the assumptions you are making about how the person that you're talking to or engaging with will respond. And you're thinking about what the consequences may be. So I want to say that assumptions, they really do constrain your choices, and they also constrain your knowledge, because you're only able to access the knowledge within the assumption that you're making. You don't have access to knowledge outside of the assumption. And so some questions that you want to ask yourself to lower the stakes, maybe before or during the engagement with a person who has more authority. A couple of really good questions that you can put in your back pocket and pull out to ask yourself are, number one, what else could be true? This is a great question that will help you open up options and possibilities and alternatives to what you are thinking. What else could be true? This helps you to lower the stakes and think more broadly and think more openly. Number two, a question that can lower the stakes is it really a terrible catastrophe if X happens? When you're thinking about the worst case scenario that can come from engaging with a person, it can send you or keep you in a negative thought loop, and it can cause you to spiral. So asking yourself the question, hold up, let's think about this. Is it really a terrible catastrophe if X happens? If this person stops talking to me for a little bit? if there's tension between this person and I? Is it a terrible catastrophe? And another really good question to ask yourself is, am I overestimating the probability of X happening? This is a great question to lower the stakes, because maybe, the stakes feel really high because you've thought about the worst case scenario and you've started ruminating and you've started, really focusing on that option as the probable option or outcome of a particular situation with someone. And so asking this question simply interrupts and disrupts that thought pattern so that you can inject a little bit of rational thinking to understand, is this really something that could happen? Am I overestimating it? So now let's talk about the other person. Asking a question is a very effective way of introducing a different or novel way of thinking about something without exposing yourself to judgment. Because a question, it's not a declaration. It's an invitation, an invitation to dialogue for you and the other person to think further, to think differently, to think with a different frame, to think along another line. And so this is another reason why questions are so critical and important to the Courage toolbox. So some questions that you might want to keep in mind when you are talking to another person that can help you lower the stakes here and actually invite a conversation, have a conversation is, if you are questioning something that person said, then you can just ask, what is your perspective based on? And that hopefully will give you more information about what another person is talking about. And it gives you an entry point into stepping into your personal agency. You can also ask, can you share an example of that? If somebody has said something that seems off the wall, or it seems like this isn't really backed up by evidence from my perspective. So can you share an example of that? Or, I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. Are you saying? These are questions that can absolutely buy you time, which is one of a benefit of asking questions. They buy you more time so that if you need to get some control over your emotions, if you need to take the pressure and heat off of you and direct it somewhere else, then questions allow you to give yourself that space and that time by inviting the other person to talk. And they also invite just more conversation and dialogue and information to become a part of the conversation itself. So questions invite us to examine or re-examine assumptions that we're making, and they can often help us to do this in a non-aggressive way. So how else can you lower the stakes? Well, you can communicate in a way that mirrors the person that you're talking to's approach. People are either fast-paced or results-driven, or they're slower paced and steady. People are either questioning and skeptical, or they're warm and inviting. So we can feel drained when we don't understand how the other person that we're speaking to receives information. And what can often happen is that we're trying to deliver the information in a way that resonates with us maybe, but doesn't resonate with them. And so you can lower the stakes and enter into conversation and other ways to engage with people of authority by just communicating in a way that mirrors their approach and style. The other thing that we talked about, but I want you to remember it, is you can lower the stakes by shifting your language and even your approach and thinking from proving, thinking that you have something to prove to someone who has more authority than you, shifting it to really just demonstrating and displaying and exhibiting your agency. You're not proving anything. You're just showing it. You're just exhibiting it and displaying it. So that's one thing to remember that can help you to, I think, lower the stakes. Another thing here is detaching from outcome. So often the stakes become higher for us because we are so attached to what the outcome is going to be. And we put all of our thought and our energy and our effort and our resources into trying to figure out what the outcome is going to be that we actually, don't have complete control over. And so detaching from the outcome, I've seen it in my own work. I've seen it with my friends. I've seen it, in lots of different situations When you detach from the outcome itself, you actually allow more space for you to be open and move and to face uncertainty and challenge in a much more calm way. What else I want to offer you here is that accept that you might fail. This is another way to lower the stakes. When you focus so much, and this is really kind of attached to detaching from the outcome, which we just talked about, if you accept that you might fail, then fear actually doesn't have as much of a grip on you anymore. When you accept the thing that fear is trying to prevent from happening as an option, as something that could actually happen, then you really do disarm fear itself. So when you go into these situations and they are marked by uncertainty and challenge and feelings of discomfort, go into them accepting that a potential outcome is that things do not turn out as ideal as you would like them to turn out. Accept that you might misstep. Accept that you might say something that you wish you had said another way. Accept that you might fail, and this is going to help you to lower the stakes when you are engaging with people of authority. And the last thing that I want to offer you here is trust yourself to figure it out. This is another way to lower the stakes, lower the tension or anxiety or anticipation of something not working out. It's just to trust yourself that you can figure it out. And so no matter what happens, no matter what the outcome is of engaging with a certain type of person, do you trust yourself to figure it out, that you will be able to respond and rebound and, I like to say go left, right, or straight based upon what the outcome is. I do think that it becomes really difficult for people to take courageous action, to move forward, to cross the boundary of certainty into uncertainty, because at the end of the day, they don't trust themselves to figure it out. They don't feel like they can rely on their abilities to then move forward if something less than ideal was to happen. And so we can all lower the stakes if we can trust ourselves that no matter what, we know we'll be able to figure it out. So these are hopefully helpful strategies to you to help you lower the stakes. And I know I already said it, but I want to say it again, is I think right now you've got a narrative that you've been playing over and over again it's just difficult. It's difficult for me to really show the fullness of my power, my personal agency when I'm dealing with people who have more authority than me. And so this is something that you've probably told yourself repeatedly. And so it's easier for your mind to access that narrative or that story when you have opportunities to engage with people with authority. And so I just invite you to disrupt that narrative. I invite you to lower the stakes by using the strategies that we've talked about here together on this call, because you are powerful. You are powerful. You deserve to be able to step into and demonstrate the fullness of your potential and power and step into your agency, your personal agency, to take up space. And so I want you to be able to do that. I want that for you. And I'm hoping that these strategies will help. Thank you for calling in. Please feel free to write us back or call back in to let us know how it goes. I want to share with you that I've got a special retreat coming up. It is called the Own Your Brilliance Retreat, and I created it specifically for Black young professional women who are ready to conjure the courage to show up and step up and speak up at work without apprehension or apology. In 2 power-packed days, participants learn and leverage my process for managing fear, activating personal courage, and taking risks so they can spend less time and energy censoring or hiding themselves and more time demonstrating their brilliance. If this sounds like it's for you, then let me say this. Listen up. It is time to stop playing games with your potential. If you're interested in attending or sponsoring a participant, please visit CandaceDoby.com for more information. We're going to end this show and end this season with a little bit of courage candy. These are the bite-sized insights on courage that you can tuck in your pocket, put in your purse, and pull them out whenever you need a taste of courage motivation. If you want to take courageous action, you need to be committed. Commitment can actually give you a sense of control in a state of uncertainty. But now, if you're going to be committed, you have to commit to the right thing. So often, when we think about conjuring courage and engaging with risk like giving critical feedback or pushing against the status quo or making a major leap, we end up pledging our commitment to the outcome. All of our cognitive energy and attention is directed toward the outcome. We think about the end, the result. Now, the end is something you co-create. And I say co-create because every variable is likely not in your control, but you co-create it by whatever you do, whatever action you take in the process. Therefore, the outcome in many cases is created out of the process. This means that your effort and your energy, your commitment essentially is better directed to the process. What strategy are you using to deliver the critical feedback? What is your setup? What is your plan to invite the person into conversation? This is process. How are you planning for the major leap? Have you saved money? Have you taken a class to get the education you need? Have you talked to someone who is competent in whatever it is you're trying to do? This is process. And for whatever fears that come up, have you hunted down the appropriate information to make fear sit in the corner and behave? Have you given thought to whether you trust yourself to figure it out, whatever it ends up being? This is all process. And when you direct your energy to the process, the outcome takes care of itself. So commit to the process, not the outcome. All right, peeps, that's it for today. If you heard me say something that really resonated with you, please drop me a line in the form of a review. And of course, share this podcast with your friends too. If you have a question that you want addressed on the Courage Hotline, visit couragehotline.com for more information on how to submit your question. Now, if you need more help conjuring your courage than what this episode provides, check out my website, candacedoby.com, to see how we might be able to work together. This podcast is written and recorded by Candace Doby. It is produced by the Can Do Company, and the music was created by Lamara Shirley.